Hello, hello, good morning everybody. Good morning. People usually clap at that point. I haven't even said anything, but... Hello everyone, and my name is Ikenna Azwike, and it is my pleasure to wish you a very warm welcome to the second Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference 2023. Excellent, very good. That was appalling. That was very, very bad, very average. Look, everyone, people have literally flown in from all over the world to be here. The Netherlands is following in Germany's footsteps by organizing this second Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference. And I know that we have a generation of leaders in this room who can actually make a difference. So I'm going to give you another chance. And this time I want a round of applause that says, we mean business, okay? Wait a second, I'll give you a cue. Look, I like that, but just wait a second. Hello everybody, my name's Ikenna Azwike, and it's my pleasure to give you a very warm welcome to the second Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference. Very good. Excellent. Okay, by way of a very brief and rapid introduction to who I am, like I mentioned, my name is Ikenna Azwike. I've now said that 3 times, which is a bit worrying, but anyway, put that aside. I'm Nigerian-British. I was born in Nigeria, moved to the UK at age 8, studied in the UK and in France. I worked in the UK, in the States, and in Singapore as a banking lawyer. I was completely miserable. Basically, I only did it because my dad wanted to do it, me to do it. And anyone with an African father can probably empathize with that. I fell in love with one of your countrywomen here in the Netherlands, and I quit law, got into journalism and broadcasting, focused on issues that have to do with almost exclusively social justice, climate justice, democracy, identity, belonging, all the light stuff, really. But I'm now, paradoxically, a much more content human being. That, in a nutshell, is who I am, but today is all about you. The program has been crafted entirely around all of you, because we live in very precarious political times. Shaping a feminist foreign policy, full stop, is or requires a profound human transformation, breaking down systems and rebuilding them with vision. Our hosts today don't profess to have all of the answers, but that's why they've invited you here to inspire one another, to learn from one another, and to listen to one another. And my goodness, do we have some rock stars here in the room, on stage shortly, who we can be inspired by and to learn from. We're going to kick off this conference with a few inspiring words from some of them. People who have made shaping a feminist foreign policy part of their everyday life. It's been a privilege to meet them already backstage and yesterday and read about them, and now we're going to introduce them to all of you. So, let's hear from our conference ambassadors.
All right, Cynthia, I have a question for you. What should we do differently when it comes to gender equality?
To not go with the mindset that boys are better than girls. We are all equal and we should all have equal opportunities in this life.
We are at a difficult point in history today where we are seeing tremendous backlash against the gains that have already been made, against progressive laws and policies that feminist movements fought for.
We face major challenges in the Philippines. They said that we are a progressive country. However, recognition of equality has been blocked by societal leaders for more than 2 decades now. LGBTIQ+ Filipinos are still bound to experience prejudice and even violence without any legal protection.
I grew up in Lusaka, Zambia. When my 17-year-old sister became pregnant, I saw the impact on her, and I realized that many girls in our community were dropping out of school due to unwanted pregnancies.
Who knows the correct way to use a condom?
I felt compelled to become an activist and an ally for adolescent girls and also adolescent boys.
My voice is the voice of women whose lives were destroyed by this war, who have been raped, whose houses have been burned, whose kids were killed. The voice of elderly women and women with disabilities who had to flee from their home regions. My voice is also the voice of hundreds of women's rights organizations working 24/7 in different regions of Ukraine. They make women's voices heard.
Everywhere you go in Berlin, you will pass these tumblestones, a memorial of the people who were living here before the Nazi took them and took their life. As a Syrian living here in Berlin in exile and can't come back to my home country because of the fear of being arrested or disappeared, these stones remind me of thousands of Syrian men and women who are disappeared today on the hands of the Syrian regime.
In Honduras, as in other Latin American countries, women, trans, and non-binary activists are being brutally murdered for being at the forefront of defending so many rights, especially the rights to have access to their territories.
If today, feminist institutions who are at the front lines are not resourced, are not supported, we are headed towards a very dangerous point.
Abortion is penalized even in cases of rape. That's why the feminist movement hold a gathering to demand the access of abortion and the right to decide in their own bodies.
We support hundreds of women searching for their beloved one and fighting for justice for them. Justice should be centered about the needs and perspective of these women and the people they represent. It should be accessible for all of them.
Today here in Turkey we have gathered leaders from 7 different regions. We are trying to contribute by working with men and boys in gender justice. We believe that we are misunderstood in the work that we do. Strongholds like army and police believe that our work is trying to emasculinate their organization. While on the other hand, the feminist movement are concerned whether or not this work is really undermining the feminist movement from within.
Through trying to be a role model for feminist ways of behaving, I believe I've inspired many young people to join the fight against teenage pregnancies.
Men are part of the solution. Gender issues are concerns for all of us.
There is a need to translate tolerance into actual support and genuine acceptance.
We need to rethink about women participations. We need to decide now and here how we can make a real difference.
Yeah, Grace. Yeah?
Wow.
Yes, our Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference ambassadors. You'll get me going if you do that, yeah. A powerful film there, both in terms of what was said and who said it. Because they may look relaxed, except for Maria, who's quite emotional, understandably, and laid back, but these folks are on the front lines of activism, speaking truth to power, helping people, giving women a voice who otherwise would not have one. So thank you for doing the work that you do. As we saw in that video, Dutch Feminist Foreign Policy focuses on 4 Rs, and all of their work reaches across all of those Rs, as it were. But I want to ask a question to each of you to kind of lean into a little bit on some of those areas in the work that you do. I'm going to start with you, Natalia. Natalia, the war in your country has changed the position of women immeasurably. There's been so much talk about what can be done for Ukraine, but I'm curious for you, in terms of the work that you do, what difference can a conference like this make?
Well, for me, feminist foreign policy is about turning the numbers into real people and into their stories. So for me, the conference is an opportunity to bring the voice of real people, to bring the stories of real people to those who are making decisions. And I hope it will result, I believe it will result in the concrete actions, in concrete strategies on how to empower women in winning the war in Ukraine and rebuilding Ukraine. And I also hope that these strategies will help to make my country, the whole world, a better place for women and men of different nationalities, generations, and identities.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And Natalia will be joining us later on in our first panel. And that's a message for us all, concrete ideas, concrete commitments. I think that's key from this conference. Laxman, I'm going to head to you. And let's talk a little bit about representation and giving women a seat at the table. In that process, what makes a good ally? What are the ingredients to good allyship?
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think allyship begins with the fact that gender equality is not a zero-sum game. It applies to everyone, and everyone else. All of us have some stake with the agenda itself and our role in that. So I think when it comes to allyship, I guess one will have to be really a meaningful allyship, and it cannot be a convenient allyship. And when you say it, that means you need to do things in a way that really advances the agenda and the vision we have set for the feminist vision for equality. And I think that requires us not only speak in theory, but do things in action and in practice. Third point is also about meaningfully intervening into spaces when, particularly in the positions of power, to challenge the power hierarchy and dynamics that is creating and that is at the root of inequalities. One of the work that we do is around really challenging the patriarchal understanding of what it means to be a man, right? So as men, I need to sort of challenge that notion within myself and hence bring that into my activism. And also that also means stepping and taking up appropriate responsibilities, keeping in mind how I should not also reinforce or enforce the same patriarchal paradigm or power inequality when I am in action in terms of as activism. And the final point I'll end with is also as in bringing it to the state level about when allyship of a state having a feminist foreign policy is also to stand for any atrocities and human rights violations that we are observing around the world, and being there truly, genuinely stand by the feminist activism, feminist movement, and call for nonviolence, which we are experiencing right now in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Syria. Sorry, in Palestine and Syria as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think in practice, that means literally asking questions, speaking up, making space, creating safe spaces, brave spaces. Okay, thanks, man. Mike, I'm going to come over to you, and I'd like to build a little bit on what Laxman was talking about in terms of representation. What needs to be done, or what can this conference do, not just to give women and young women, girls, a seat at the table, but also real decision-making power? Yeah, what's your call to action for this audience?
To be honest, real power is never freely given. It needs to be taken. So we need to support women and girls to take up that power. And we also need to support women and girls in their own agendas, their own action, and their own leadership to take up that power. All of us in here, we need to make sure that we fight for equality. And once we do that, we are going to see a change when it comes to the power that is given to women and girls. And above all, we need to support women in making decisions about their own bodies. And only if we achieve that, that's when we are going to see equality revolution being achieved.
Wow, beautifully spoken. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you. Let me head to Anisha. Anisha, admirable, noble goals. Everyone on this stage has them. To achieve them, we need resources. What approach to resources, is there like a new game-changing approach that we need, or what needs to be done in order to ensure that the right people, right organizations have the resources to achieve these goals?
Well, nothing new or radical. We just need to start listening what the movements have been saying for many, many years. So there's nothing new. There's no innovation. It is just centering the needs of the movements, being movement-led, being movement-centered. And it's the same demand of more resources, more flexible resources, more sustainable resources. The popular slogan of the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us, needs to be finally heard and applied here, right? And the revolution will not be funded, but the revolutionaries need to be supported. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me go to Raul. Raul, there you are at the beginning. Zooming in on the universal rights and safety of people from the LGBTIQ+ community, what do you want to see happen after this conference?
Actually, that's a very interesting question. Hi again, I'm Raul from the Free TVMe program in the Philippines. This conference actually could just be like any other conference if first we don't stop talking about and we continuously talk about LGBTIQ+ rights, lives, human rights, socioeconomic rights, and safety and security of this community. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that this community are struggling. Most importantly, out of this conference, I want us to make sure that after this conference, things are being communicated to the community, to our respective community. LGBTIQ+ rights and struggles are being recognized, are being actioned upon, because after all, this conference should matter to the community. After all, this conference should mean something to the community. So queer community, queer people belong in FFP. Thank you.
Yeah, great, clear, thank you. And really echoing Anisha's thoughts there, you know, the answers are out there, it just requires people to genuinely listen and take action. Okay, Maria, you do, and your organization, you do the heavy lifting when it comes to helping Syrian women get justice and improve their lives. What do you hope this conference can achieve?
What I hope is really to get to a common understanding that feminist foreign policy is not only about women's rights and gender equality. It's really about using gender analysis and gender lens to understand conflict, peace, power, and arms. Is to getting back humanity to the center of our actions at domestic and international level, that we cannot accept the dehumanization of a whole population, and that will only lead to genocides. I need to continue.
Take your time.
Yeah, please. Thank you. I came here with the hope that we have reached a common understanding that the all heavy militarized masculine solutions to conflict and violence have led us to nowhere. They have benefited no one except arms trade and arms industry. And it is time to really think through a feminist lenses. Yeah, 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's okay. Take your time. I'm here.
Solving issues, violence, conflict through feminist lens means that as women we have understood from long time that violence is continuum, and we need to analyze violence through this lens. We need to get to the root causes to violence to be able to solve it, and to understand and to agree that occupation is violence. If we really want to adopt a feminist foreign policy, we need to stand and support civilians. We cannot accept the killing and massacre of children. We cannot abstain from voting for a resolution for peace. Thank you.
Yeah, great. People are standing. And that's, I think that needs to be shouted very clearly. That is what feminism is about. A feminist movement is about destroying violence and dominance, you know. So, and that's why we're here. So thank you very much, Maria. Okay. Sophia, on a personal level, your country has had, or rather here, on a personal, what do you hope that this conference will achieve when it comes to universal rights and safety of activists in Honduras, in your home country?
Thank you. So I want that any activist or defender like Berta Cáceres has to be monitored for being at the forefront, defending their lands and territories. I want that any Garifuna community in Honduras or any black community in the world have to be fair, for the life, because they are defending the right to be there in the territory. And I want to achieve the engagement, the real engagement from governments through feminist foreign policies and to donors to engage with feminist movements, because they are proposing way of life. We are facing violence and context of crisis. And for the work that we do as Urgent Action Funds, we know resources must be immediately available to face that crisis.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sophia. Yeah. And there was, you know, just this beautiful moment just backstage while we were waiting to come on stage where Natalia's was in the video, and I think, Anisha, you put your arm around Natalia, and it was beautiful. You were just supporting her, and there's so much solidarity here. There's a lot of solidarity in the room, and that is what this event is designed for. We need to lean into that word today. Let's suspend judgment on the things that we hear today. Let's really listen. Let's make it a superpower. And last of all, let's give a massive round of applause to our conference ambassadors. Bye-bye. Oh, thank you. Okay. Anisha specifically talked about the need for resources to help achieve our goals, and to simply get resources, to get our hands on resources, to get it in the bank accounts in the right places. We need vision, we need ambitious leadership, and we need political will. And we have two keynote speakers who embody many of those things. So first of all, I'd like for you to give give our speaker a warm round of applause. The first speaker is the Prime Minister of Aruba, Evelyn Wever-Kors.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real honor to be here today and share these very important 2 days with you. Thank you so much for being here today and for taking the time to be here in person, to have traveled from far away or perhaps a little closer, because with one look at the room, I'm very happy to see a lot of excited faces, excited for these next 2 days, and also curious of what will happen. We are here today together because we all believe in the same cause, equality for all. Whether we work for an NGO or for the private sector, whether we are women's rights activists or students, whether our governments use the label feminist or not, without the progress made on gender equality, I am certain that I would not have been here today as the first female Prime Minister of Aruba. And for those who wonder, Aruba is a small country, a small island in the Caribbean, part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We are here today to contribute because we want to contribute to achieving equality for all. We especially focus on the rights, the resources, and the representation of women, the LGBTIQ+ community, and the marginalized groups, because we know there is still a very long way to go. And we agree on the why it is important to advance gender equality. I don't have to tell you. We know it, and we experience it in our daily lives. We have just heard some very compelling examples. In some countries, women and girls are punished for wearing too many clothes, in others for wearing too few. But the how can be challenging. How can we advance gender equality in our countries and around the world? How can we contribute to this important cause with our financial instruments and policies? And during this conference, we want to further explore our means and methods. That is why we are here today, to shape feminist foreign policy and work towards an equal world together. And we build on the shoulders of many people before us, feminist trailblazers and women's rights activists. The Kingdom of the Netherlands joined the group of feminist foreign policy countries last year. Many of these pioneers are here in the room today. For our kingdom, the feminist foreign policy is about increasing our ambition towards equality in general, and equality for women, the LGBTIQ+ community, and marginalized people more specifically. Everyone benefits from gender equality, and that is why we take an intersectional approach. Last year in Aruba, we presented the first gender policy in collaboration with different stakeholders and with support of the UN Women. With this gender policy, Aruba strives to enable an environment in which gender equality and women empowerment in all sectors and society becomes possible. The feminist label has helped us in many ways. However, sometimes it also leads to tensions. But most of all, it increases the attention to what it is all about. And at the same time, I know that the label feminist does not tell the whole story. There are many governments around the world that base their foreign policies on feminist principles, that aim to advance gender equality, and that are doing an incredible job in doing so. In the end, it is about the idea and the ambition behind the feminist foreign policy and the label feminist. As we all know, feminist foreign policy is a great concept that we are proud of, and it is also a challenging subject within our own ministries and countries, but also in a world where the rights, the resources, and the representation of women is decreasing. Today's conference is called Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy, and governments cannot do that alone. We do not want to do it alone, because all of you in the room today, and many who are not here today, are so important in this process. Collaboration with civil society is crucial for a feminist foreign policy. NGOs, women's rights activists, academics, the private sector, international organizations, your insights are crucial if we want to have a strong feminist foreign policy that not only aims to advance gender equality, but is also successful in doing so. As the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we are here today to facilitate a dialogue, to listen and to work together with you all, to advance and shape our own feminist foreign policy, and to shape the feminist foreign policies and gender equality-focused policies all around the world. To do our part to contribute to a global movement of people that work every day to advance the rights of everyone, especially women and girls, the LGBTIQ+ community, and marginalized people. Because equality not only contributes to a safer and more prosperous world, but because it is our moral duty to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And now I'd like to give the floor to the Dutch Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, Liesje Schreinemacher.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Shaping Feminist Foreign Policy Conference. And it's encouraging to see so many people from all over the world, even though we meet at a profoundly challenging moment in world history. In addition to the war in Ukraine, everyone's eyes are now on shocking developments in Israel and the Palestinian territories. And these developments are dreadful and deeply concerning and demand diplomacy. The human suffering and the loss of innocent lives, many of whom are women and children. And like some of the previous speakers also emphasized, we are very concerned about the seriousness and the scale of the conflict. This is a terrible tragedy that we never wanted to witness in our lifetime. That is why the Netherlands urgently calls for humanitarian pauses and a corridor to alleviate the suffering. The flow of humanitarian supplies into Gaza must be accelerated so that basic human needs are met and further loss of innocent lives can be prevented. We must do what we can to stop the suffering, a timeless notion that goes to the heart of what feminist foreign policy is all about. Because it is no coincidence that women's involvement in diplomacy, in security and peace might have been triggered by war, now more than a century ago. In 1915, while the First World War was tearing Europe apart, more than 1,100 women from 12 countries organized a women's conference for peace here in the city of The Hague. Aletta Jacobs, the Netherlands' most famous suffragette, gave a stirring speech. And her words are as true today as they were then. She said, "The governments of the world, based on the views of only half of humanity, have failed to find answers to how resolve international conflicts. So it is the sacred duty of every woman to stand up and demand their share in governing the world. Only when women are seated in all the parliaments of all the nations, only when they have a political voice, will they have the power to successfully demand that international conflicts are solved by arbitration or reconciliation." She was ahead of her time, and it took the world far too long to heed her words. As there are countless other crises affecting women today, causing suffering and delay instead of progress and change. Ukraine, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Sudan, the list goes on. We are facing a global backlash against women's rights and the rights of LGBTIQ+ people, and against sexual and reproductive health and rights. But even so, I believe that the best response to this is optimism and show that feminism is the solution. I firmly believe that it can solve inequalities, it can solve pay gaps and labor shortages. And it can improve the lives of women as well as men. And it can help us make the world more creative and innovative by offering opportunities to people who are now being left behind. That's why the Netherlands is committed to pursuing a feminist foreign policy and why we're urging others to do the same. Because this is something we cannot do alone. Fortunately, the number of countries with feminist foreign policies is growing. We saw this in New York recently, where a record number of government ministers attended the first ever meeting on feminist foreign policy at UNHQ, where we agreed on feminist approaches to foreign policy. And today we'll have the opportunity to meet other courageous activists, expert academics, people in the private sector and driven policymakers. Together you can identify best practices and build networks, find new ways to advance the movement. But we should also acknowledge that the burden is not just on women's shoulders. This fight needs to be fought by men equally. We need every feminist, regardless of their gender, especially at this time of global crises. And I hope that at this conference, you will find new ways to get as many people involved as possible. Thank you and good luck.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to say thank you to all of you. Great. First of all, I think it's been a passionate start, a powerful start, both from our conference ambassadors and the substance of what was said by the two ministers. I want to say thank you. I mentioned the word solidarity. I mentioned leaning into it. I want to say thank you to everyone who stood up, everyone who is chanting. Thank you very much, both for speaking up, but absolutely also for being respectful, because you know that there is also a time to do these things, and this room is full of people who want the same things as you. So thank you for speaking up, and thank you for being respectful, okay? Throughout the rest of today, there will be opportunities for you to share your thoughts as well. We have interviews, panel discussions, keynotes, breakout sessions. I'm looking forward to attending them as well. There'll be interactive exercises with all of you, and there'll be questions for you, opportunities for you to share your thoughts, like I said, because it really is, that's the bottom line here. It's only with your ideas, your networks, your hard work that any of the goals of our conference ambassadors and your goals will be achieved. So you need to stay engaged throughout this conference. A couple of practical things before we start. The network app is a functionality we're using for you to respond to some questions we're going to pose to you. So if you haven't already done so, please please download the network app. I don't know if we have a slide about that, but download the network app and use that. The Wi-Fi network and password will hopefully at some point be on the screen behind me, or we can find it soon. Yep, there we go. Make sure your phones are on silent, but please do tweet, do talk about what's just happened, the substance of what's being discussed. Post on Instagram, tag the ministry, tag organizations, tag me, tag one another, tag everybody. Let's keep this conversation going and use the hashtag Feminist Foreign Policy and SFFP. We're starting everything 15 minutes later until lunch, so bear that in mind when you're looking at the program. Everything is moved up 15 minutes, but after lunch we'll have caught up and everything goes back to the original timing. Practical thing, okay, I've got to talk about fire exits. Fire exits are there and there, but if in doubt, just follow me. I'll be the one screaming and sprinting out that way, okay? Okay, listen, feminist foreign policy, bizarrely, is often seen as a soft topic, which is extremely strange because it is the diametric opposite of that. The idea of shaping a feminist foreign policy is a radical idea in this time. It's a radical idea. It's about security. It plays out in war and it plays out in peace. And that's why the first substantive panel we've got at this conference has the theme Women, Security and Peace. How do we ensure that women are structurally involved in shaping and preserving peaceful, just and inclusive societies, security, and sustainable development? Half of our panel today will be made up of representatives of organizations from conflict areas, and the other half is composed of representatives from government. So let's welcome our guests to the stage. My first guest is an advocate for the inclusion of women to achieve justice for Syria, the Executive Director of Women Now Syria, Maria Al-Abde. Maria. Next up, an activist working to make recovery efforts in Ukraine gender responsive, the director of the Ukrainian Women's Fund, Natalia Karbowska. Natalia. Thank you. a dedicated fighter for girls' education, women empowerment, economic development, and human rights in Afghanistan, the founder and executive director of Vision Development, Madina Mahmoudi. Madina, thank you. And also a warm welcome to the representatives from government and multilateral organizations. First up, the Deputy Director General for Political Affairs of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Erika Schouten. Erika, welcome. Thanks. Next up, the Ambassador of Colombia to the Netherlands, Carolina Olarte Bacares. Yeah. Oh, I got the arrangement wrong. Oh yeah, no, that's right. Good, you're sitting there. And last up, the Director of Operations of the Dutch Ministry of Defense, Rear Admiral Peter Reesink. So I'm going to shuffle you around. But Carolina, would you mind coming to sit me? Yeah, great. Okay, go. Thanks very much. Okay, to kick off our discussion here, let's have a look at an introduction on the women, peace and security theme by two of our conference ambassadors who are sitting right over there. Let's run the tape, please.
The war showed that women, peace and security agenda in Ukraine today is more actual than ever. The security of each and every woman is the security of the whole country. Unfortunately, it is similar for all wars. Women are affected the most. Their voices are not heard. I will never forget the story of a young Ukrainian woman. She was raped by 8 men during 40 minutes. These 40 minutes changed her life forever. How many lives of women, men, boys and girls in Ukraine and in the other countries have been changed like this in just a few minutes.
I come here a lot with Syrian women holding the photo of their beloved one they are searching for, holding photos of Syrian victims, demonstrating for justice, for Syria not to be forgotten.
This organization in Kharkiv is called Volunteer 68. In addition to providing space for elderly women and women with disabilities, the organization supports women in creating self-support group. They are supporting other women and men, are working with the government. They became part of the solution. They make women's voices heard.
We work to achieve a sustainable peace in our home country, Syria, when women and girls can be part of all aspects of life, starting from ending the conflict and building a better Syria when all citizens have equal rights.
Often those who are making decisions about women only see them as victims, not as those who know the solution and who can be the solution.
When women are around the table, they will discuss violence as a continuum. We cannot think about ending conflict without dealing with the root causes. Women will go deep into finding solutions, fight against young men joining army groups. They will care about the education of young boys. If we really want to rethink the women, peace and security agenda, we need to rethink about women participation in peace and in all aspects of life.
Thank you very much. Madina, Maria in that video stressed the importance of involving women and girls in all aspects of life. In your home country, in Afghanistan, the Taliban have kind of dismantled so much of the progress that was made for women and girls over the last 20 years. Can you, first of all, bring us up to speed on what the position of women in Afghanistan right now is? Oh, hold on, is your mic working? Mic doesn't seem to be working, otherwise I'll use the hand mic. Try again.
I think it's working now, First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. Conferences such as this one and the important content of this event is very close to my heart, my identity, my country, my heart and my soul. The historic decline of the situation of women and depriving all their access to their basic rights, depriving girls from secondary education, universities, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, shrinking civic space, has really made it challenging and made the situation worse for not only women, but all Afghans in the country. We have been contributing to raising the voice and educating the policymakers, those who are really contributing to make the lives better for countries in the war zone. One of the important things that I want to highlight here with the presence of everyone that's very much important is that despite all the investments that have been doing the international community, member states, policymakers, civil society, I'm sure everyone is actively engaged in this agenda. Why still this women and peace security agenda so fragile? Like countries and war zones, including myself, that I belong to, within a few hours, the country collapses. And in the effect of the war and conflict, it's always the women who are more affected. Women are the key actors for promoting this agenda. And if you see it deeply, in the meantime, women are also the most victim of pursuing this agenda. In the countries that are in the war zones or they are affected by the conflict. So what's really making fragile this agenda in the countries? First of all, lack of political will. We need to create political will for pursuing this agenda at the government level. This is so important that women issues should not be taken as instrument for political promotions, for political campaigns. The symbolic representation of the woman shouldn't be numbers and quantity, it should be in quality. Women should not be biologically present in a stage or in deliberations or in dialogues. They should be present with their mind, with their brain, with their soul, with their contribution, and with the say to really make an impact. We need to develop mechanisms for monitoring of this agenda. You see, there have been a lot of investments on policy making, but when it comes to the implementation, there's a lot of barriers. Some countries, maybe at the political level, there are barriers. There's no political willingness.
And can you make it concrete? How have they been failed? Or what should be done? What should the international community now be doing? What does political will look like in practice for you?
The polity is written very beautifully, but when it comes to the implementation, most of the countries are not implementing it, or they're not very much dedicatingly implementing it. We need to have regular impact assessment of this policy on all the countries, and we need to hold countries accountable for its obligations on the implementation of this policy. And we need to really do the impact assessment, that what are the challenges for implementation when it comes to the implementation of this policy on the ground. And we really need to see the barriers that are stopping. For example, now we have a huge investment. After 20 years, there are countries like mine that women, again, they're moving forward, then again there's backlash and becoming like zero, literally zero. And then again, we have the examples of so many other countries that today we are seeing. So what's the main challenge? There should be regular monitoring and regular impact assessment. What's the impact of this agenda on the countries, on the woman? And the woman should be seen as the actors for change. We are driving the change within our countries. We should not be seen as the victims. Yeah. And we should not be the victims of this process. We should be the key actors for contribution to this agenda.
Medina, I want to come back to that a little bit later and think about, how does that work in practice for the international community that doesn't want to be seen to be supporting the Taliban, but at the same time, women's organizations also suffering. But for now, let me go to Maria. You work with women in Syria. Can you share some of the stories that they are sharing with you when it comes to fighting for justice for them?
There is a lot of stories, but maybe I would like to start by saying that, unfortunately, the film was made with me in Berlin, but we are a network of more than 120 women working inside Syria in different areas. And I need here really to salute my colleagues who are still working under bombs. So today in Syria, both northeast and northwest Syria are still under bombardments of the Syrian regime, but also other actors in the conflict. And those women continue to work every day and to make change. From the work in Berlin, I think there is a lot of role models, women that I have worked with that became my role models, and I believe one of them is Fadwa Mahmoud, a woman who is searching for her son and her husband who have been arrested 10 years ago, and she didn't hear anything back from them. She is fighting for justice for them, and she always said, I want the people who arrest my kids to be arrested, to be judged, but not to disappear, because violence will not solve the issue, because he have a mother who have the right to visit him. So it is what feminist perspective is for me, is really to face violence with justice.
And are you able to help them get that justice? For instance, this woman's case, I mean, how far along are you?
No, we stand in solidarity with each other. Like today, we are standing in solidarity with sisters in Ukraine, in Afghanistan, and everywhere. So the network we are forming is providing safe space for women, is providing tools, is providing solidarity, listening to their leadership. And I think that is the most important, is really be listening to the leadership of that woman. And in the case of Syria, I think something very powerful the women and victims have achieved is really to get a UN resolution on searching for the missing person in Syria. And here I would like to also mention that a few weeks ago, Syrian women and men victims of torture were demonstrating in front of the ICC to stop the torture in Syria, and they were very positive and supportive of Netherlands and Canada action to bring the Syrian regime to the ICC. And we encourage really to bring all criminal states to the ICC because we believe justice should be justice should not be à la carte.
And Maria, I also asked Sophia, but on a personal level, it feels to me like such a different skill set to give people support and compassion and also be their legal advocate. How do you manage that?
I think it's not about me. It's really like you need to find, if you really believe you need to prepare a better future for your children, you need to step up for justice. We don't have the choice. We don't have the luxury to do nothing. And I think history told us, like you have seen me on the film, and a lot of Syrian women I worked with, really, we feel the victims. We feel the victims of the Nazi, and we really hope that violence and extermination will never happen again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Natalia, you said that you don't want women to be seen as victims, but as the solution. Can you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
Well, indeed, women are vulnerable in wars in Ukraine and in many other countries, but women are strong. And we actually discussed with the colleagues from Ukraine who are also here in the audience that we might not feel comfortable during the thunderstorms like we had yesterday here, but we will go home back to Ukraine the day after tomorrow to fight, to continue our fight under missiles, under strikes, several strikes during the night, because this is important. This is our home. This is our life, and this is, the country that we want to have peace, to win, and to rebuild. When we were talking today, there was other thing that I was thinking about, solidarity of women, which is also very important. In our case, we see it in Ukraine, and there are so many women that we work with. Some of them call themselves feminists. Some of them call themselves just women activists. Some of them don't even think that they belong to feminism or activism, to the movement, but they are the movement. And we at the Ukrainian Women's Fund think it is extremely important and necessary to support the movement. And the movement actually is making all of us, no matter in Ukraine or in Syria or in the other part of the world, is making us stronger and is making us more resilient. And the third thing that I wanted to say about while listening to my colleagues is the fact that, well, we live in different countries on different, 1,000 kilometers from each other. But I see how similar are the countries in war. There are so many similarities that we face. And the wars are connected. They are definitely connected. Maria was saying that, I even wrote your quote, that occupation is violence. You said this at the beginning. 7% of the territory of Ukraine was occupied by Russia in 2014 and 15. Now, in 2022, around quarter, 25% of the territory of Ukraine is occupied by Russia. Isn't it violence? And if we let, and here is the message that I wanted to bring from this stage to those who are making decisions. If we let dictatorships win wars in one country, then it will be a signal to the other dictatorships that everything is possible in the global security order. So do we want this? I don't think so.
I would like to add, if Russia has been held accountable for its crime in Syria, maybe Ukraine would have never happened.
Yeah. I mean, Natalia, when I hear you talk about the wartime needs of women, you're so well versed in them, but your organization actually, you've been doing this from far before the war. How did you kind of transform the foundation to serving the wartime needs? What kind of changes have there been?
Oh, we have been working, supporting women and women's or feminist movement, as many of us call it in Ukraine, for almost 23 years now. Yeah. We are the movement. We think we are the movement, and we know the best the movement. We are, of course, as a women's fund located in Ukraine, it was so easy for us it took us basically a week only to transform our operations and to launch rapid response support to women activists, to women's organizations. We were there in remote communities when many humanitarian donors were not there yet. And we will continue to be there. Now we see that it is extremely important not only to provide humanitarian support to women, children and people of Ukraine, but also for the movement to be political. And this is what we do. The old patriarchal systems didn't change. So there is a role for us, for women's, for feminist movements, for women's funds in changing the systems, in changing the patriarchal order of the world, of our countries, of our communities. So this is what we do. For this, of course, we need several things. We need to make women visible. Again, about the voice. I keep talking about the voice. I'm sorry, maybe you're hearing this from me for the third time, but I do think it's important. The voice of women is important. There are thousands of women that know what to say, but they do not have access to different platforms where decisions are made. So we all should be their voice. It is important to give women power, and power means resources. As Anisha was saying this morning, my colleague, she was from the other Women's Fund, she was saying about the importance and the need of resources for women. And indeed, we need money, resources. for women to survive, to feed their families, for women to leave their abusive husbands, for women to run for the office, and for women to change the systems. And these resources should be flexible, should be open, should be transparent, should be long-term, and should be directed without fear. Because sometimes we see the fear from international organizations of delivering resources to the local level, of the trust to local people. So there should be trust.
Yeah, that's something I want to build on. Yeah. This idea of the fear of the international community in building local, in empowering locally, in providing resources. Medina touched on it earlier, but there seems to be a reticence, a reluctance of the international community to engage, I understand why, but with the Taliban. In the last 2 years, you know, as distasteful as it is, there's been stability. How on earth do we ensure that the women's organizations aren't the victims? I mean, does there need to be some level of normalization in terms of interaction and engagement with the Taliban to help women?
There have been many dialogues with Taliban. These dialogues, some have been effective, some not. There are some movements from within the country because there are some dialogues and engagement with the Taliban inside the country. We realized that those dialogues inside the country have been more effective comparing with the dialogues outside the country, because we really believe that changes, that these movements are also inclusive of the women in these movements, and most of them are also led by women inside the country, from grassroots level, from communities. They are building peaceful cohesion, peaceful communities, community engagement. Also our organization, we started like a man and boys network. We are working with men to bring them on board for support of, for the cause of women, but it's not just women, but also the impact of the inclusion of women and girls and its effectiveness for the voice and for the girls' education, for women's right to work, because now women are not allowed to work, girls are not allowed to go to school, and so many other basic rights that women and girls are deprived from. So these movements are being led from inside the country, and they're being more effective, and there are dialogues and negotiations with Taliban from within the countries, within the country in Afghanistan.
And you want to see more of that?
There's a lot. I'm the founder of one of the networks, Change the Drive Network, that we are facilitating the dialogues with the Taliban, with the international community, and with the Afghans inside the country, because there's a gap between the with the people and the de facto authorities and the international community, because of the access, because of the lack of that information. The international community doesn't have much access to the realities on the ground, and the people, those who are living inside the country. Most of the member states were thinking. I had a trip in Geneva. I was addressing the Human Rights Council back in June, and I had meetings with some of the member states, and I realized that there is just so much lack of information. They didn't have information about the realities on the ground. They were thinking that women are the victim. Poor woman, we feel pity for you, we feel you, you need our support, we are there for you. And I told them that yes, some of the political changes, they really made us vulnerable. But in the meantime, we are leading the communities. Yes, we are not there on papers because women are not allowed to be politicians. We are not allowed to be leaders. We are not allowed, our signatures is not accepted as official signatures. We are not allowed. We are not on the papers because we are not allowed to be on the papers. But we are the invisible leaders. We are the brain behind these initiatives. We have more than 200,000 beneficiaries of our initiatives from our network and organization just in 1 year. And it's the woman.
So you're giving them this information, then what? What do you want them to do? Can you give an example of a concrete policy, something that could happen tomorrow that would affect people's lives?
For example, we told them that yes, the women are deprived from their basic rights, but in the meantime support women as employers, because women in economy is still open. We can still get licenses, we can still contribute in economic development of Afghanistan and also for women. We have a lot of domestic violence increasing. We have mental health and psychological problems increasing because of domestic violence. And domestic violence, one of the important factors is the economic dependency of the woman on man. And also the men lost their jobs because of the political shift. So this is also the increase of the unemployment rate. We have a lot of addiction, we have a lot of internally displaced people, we have a lot of people migrating legally or illegally from the country. So they are all linked with each other. And the core reason is also the economic situation that we are in the crisis. So if the door is still open, so let's work with the door which is already open and support women as employers. If you negotiate with critical groups of people to say, give women their rights, they will negotiate with you and they will have their reasons, and from their perspective, maybe they will not. But you don't have to tell us to to hire women. We will do it ourselves because this is our gender, and beyond that, it's our identity and a contribution. We want to maintain our socioeconomic contribution to the society as equal members of the society.
So you want more engagement with local organizations from the international community?
Absolutely.
In your context, in the context of Maria, finding justice, getting justice for the Syrian women that your organization works with, what would help them?
I think it's very good to have women on panels, but I think we need more women on decision-making discussions. I think...
Which discussions? Which discussions?
All discussions. In peace talk in Syria, who are completely a failed process, women were invited as advisor to the special representative. I think what Syrian women have been able to do is to impose their own agenda, and the missing person is only, and the detainees is only one example. There is a lot of women's and victim group also working together for victims of chemicals attack in Syria, victims of forced displacement. And they are all standing in solidarity with each other because it's very rare that you are suffering from only one crime as a person living in conflict, but also as a woman, because all those crimes are just adding to the structural violence that you live through women. So getting back, yes, I think women are very much invited to tell their stories, but not to tell how things should be going. I remember a colleague, a great friend from Afghanistan, who is like maybe today almost 70 years old, and she was telling us, like, 20 years ago, no one listened to us when we were saying prioritizing education of young boys, prioritizing education of young girls. We cannot go out of the violence in Afghanistan without education. But yeah, women are invited, applauds, and then no one is listening.
Okay.
I think we need to start listening.
And Natalia, I mean, those are examples of what needs to happen. To what extent in Ukraine is a gender lens already being used to empower women?
Well, I think 1325 actually, and the National Action Plan on 1325 is a perfect example that civil society, women's rights organizations can be critical friends, as we say, with the government on making supportive policies, the policies that will work for women and the policies that are based on the needs of women. Of course, there are so many other challenges, but I think it's important to build on this example that we have in Ukraine, how women are involved in the policies starting from the grassroots level. We do a lot of work on localization of National Action Plan on 1325. Coming from the national to the local level, I think it's important to use these examples now, this experience in Ukraine for the rebuilding, for the recovery of Ukraine, because at the moment, unfortunately, the recovery strategy in Ukraine is gender blind.
Is what, sorry?
Is gender blind. Women are not as involved as we want to in the development of the strategies of the recovery of Ukraine.
Okay, so that needs to change as well. Let's go to our government and representatives. I'd like to actually start with you, Erica, because you heard very clearly there from Medina that she wants more engagement from the international community with women's rights organizations. How is the Netherlands kind of, what's the Dutch approach to engaging directly with local grassroots organizations, bearing in mind that the Taliban is also in power?
So you're asking the question specifically about Afghanistan or in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pointed example there, but there are probably it's applicable to other areas.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the key points of the Dutch feminist foreign policy is to engage directly with civil society, and not just at the international level, but as was also said, I think by Natalia, very important to engage with women's rights organizations and feminist movements at the local level, because they have the knowledge, they are the eyes and ears on the ground that help us to inform our policy. And then, of course, it's quite a dilemma, the case of Afghanistan, because on the one hand, we're acutely aware that women and girls, well, not only them, but they bear the major brunt of the Taliban policy. And we don't want to legitimize the Taliban, and we don't want to legitimize their policy, but at the same time, we want to assist women and girls and the general population in Afghanistan as best as we can. So the information from brave women and role models as Medina help us very much to craft our policy and to see what we can do while being cognizant of that dilemma.
I just wonder, how much of a dilemma should it be, though? I mean, it's a kind of, Medina's is a battle cry for engagement, and the facts on the ground are that the Taliban is in charge. They have been for 2 years. There doesn't seem to be international engagement to change that. So at what point does the Netherlands and the international community at wide, what are the right ingredients, or what's the right moment for them to say, you know what, we've got to engage?
I think at the moment what we're prioritizing is humanitarian assistance, and to deliver that in an effective way. Some contacts with the Taliban are needed, but we limit that to those contacts that are functional. Because, as I said, we don't want to legitimize a policy that we can in no way support. But we have to keep looking and searching all the time for ways in which we can assist the population, and women and girls in particular, without crossing that line. So I think the engagement with local organizations is a key ingredient for that.
Yeah. Okay, let's think about if there are other areas, regions that the international community can learn from. I'm thinking about the Colombian context, Carolina. After years of armed conflict, Colombia has entered a process to build peace. What role did women play in including, through civil society organizations, in getting to that peace?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us to this very important and meaningful conversation. Regarding our experience in Colombia, the role of women was crucial, was definitely fundamental to draft and to achieve our peace agreements. First of all, they were part of the process from the very beginning. They were part because, first of all, they were suffering, they were enduring violence and structural schemes of domination. And in that regard, they were the best persons to understand what were and where were the root causes of our conflict. They took leading roles in the negotiation. They were part of the different teams of the negotiations. And at the same time, they were also contributors to the negotiations through civil societies, through organizations, collectively and individually, as social leaders, and also in academia. So they were part of the picture in leading roles and giving important insights to understand how to draft this important process of peace resolution in our country. Yeah.
And are there any, I don't know, inspiring specific examples of the role that they contributed?
Yes, there are so many. In fact, just today, we accompanied 2 leading women to the airport. They were here in the Netherlands, giving a testimony of their fight and their leading role in our peace process. The Tejedoras de Mampuhan is a collective of women who suffered violence in the north part of the country, and during the conflict, they decided to get together in order to transform therapeutically their harm in something meaningful to reach reconciliation. So they started crafting and sewing tapestries, and that was one of the main testimonies of how building peace is something abroad, something more than stop violence. It's something that should go directly to create spaces of meaningful reconciliation. So testimony of women and the participation with their own experience were absolutely crucial to shape our peace process in a reconciliation perspective.
It makes you wonder why it didn't happen earlier. I mean, in hindsight, are there things you would have done differently, the government would have done differently, include participation earlier, or, I mean, what could have been done differently to even speed things up?
I think you touch upon one of the main topics, one of the main arms that we have right now to reach peace just now, and it's social dialogue. As many of you have mentioned before, it is important to include everybody in the conversation. Colombia is a country geographically very diverse, with a lot of populations and communities in the periphery, and those communities were absent, absolutely absent of different conversations. So engaging in a participatory process where everybody has a voice, especially those who has been suffering their human rights violations, I think was the most important tool. We unfortunately engage in this meaningful and participatory scheme just a few years before, but I think it's never too late. And now we strongly believe that on one of the core issues of our feminist foreign policy is exactly social dialogue, engaging social dialogue with everybody in our country.
Yeah. Okay, with engaging social dialogue with absolutely everybody, and on that note, I want to bring in Peter. Peter? Shall I call you Peter or Peter?
Peter.
Peter.
Well, Peter is fine. Yeah.
Okay, Peter. Maria mentioned something to me yesterday. She was actually literally wondering, why is a rear admiral someone from the Ministry of Defense even on this panel? Maybe let's address that first. Like, why are you here?
Well, it's a good question. I was asked. No, but to be very honest, I think it's very good to be here. And besides the reason why I'm here, I'm very humble and impressed by the stories, especially from the other side of this panel. But I think, especially from a defense organization, which is typically a man organization, it's crucial to be aware of gender perspectives and find ways to implement it. So I think it's crucial to be here.
And how are you doing that then?
Well, you have a plan. That's always the first
Elaborate,
answer.
Please.
It's a plan. It's called a Defense Action Plan within the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And basically, the first thing you need to be aware of is that you need to implement all kinds of gender perspectives in all activities that you do. And that comes down to raising awareness. Raising awareness in the whole of your organization. We have an organization of about 11% women. So we come from a long way. So it starts with, we made up a online course 2 years ago. We made a 3-day gender focal point course. So we started training all of our personnel in all different levels and tried to bring that awareness up.
I mean, an online course.
Well, you have to start somewhere.
Okay, let's be a bit ambitious, though. I mean, in a kind of blue sky scenario, anything's possible. How do we accelerate that?
I think the big acceleration will be coming from the gender focal points.
From the?
Gender focal points.
Yep.
We have trained now about 100. They will be dispersed within our organization, and they will be the stimulus for all activities which take place. So that's going to be the driving factor.
Okay. And you know, like many things, Natalia managed to transform her organization to make it wartime ready, but at times of crisis, there's a lot of pressure, and I can imagine one of the first areas where people say, oh, we need to just make progress, so let's forget the gender lens. But why is it especially, or tell me, like, do you think it's especially crucial at times of crisis to have that gender lens?
Well, if you don't want to miss in the area of operations where we operate, or the different perspectives, the way society ticks, the differences between men, women, boys, girls, then you won't be as effective as you need to be. So there's a big need to do so.
And why won't you be as effective?
Because you're going to do different and stupid things, which don't resonate enough to the female population or boys or girls or whoever.
Okay. Natalia, are there things that you heard from, for instance, I'm thinking specifically Carolina and the Colombian experience, but maybe someone else that you think that's something that's inspiring for a Ukrainian context?
Yes, I was making notes for myself.
You're a big note taker.
Yes, I am. Because they were, you know, I really, you know, many things resonated. First about that it is important to start many processes. It was important to start many processes before, as you were saying in Colombia, Carolina, but still the time is always, you know, there is always a time and there is also always a possibility to do this, and we are thinking also in terms of conflict-related sexual violence in Ukraine. We are learning a lot from Balkan countries' experience, where the reparations, the justice came 25 years after. We are learning from this experience, and this is what we want to change for Ukraine, that, you know, the system with reparations, the justice has to come much earlier. What resonated when I was listening to the representative of Ministry of Defense was that indeed people are important, but systems are always also important. If we don't have systems, or if the systems are not working, then we will not achieve the change. We can, you know, go to as many conferences as possible, talk to as many people as possible, but they will be listening and shaking hands and not changing anything. We need to change the systems, and we need the systems that are working for women.
Okay, let me go straight to Erica. I mean, you're in a system, and it is, you know, it's very difficult. It's complex. People don't like changing systems often. They like how things are. You know, I hate it when my phone updates, and it's irritating. How do you go about changing a system?
I think it's about, you know, who is in the system, who's embodying the system. I think it's very important that, for instance, within the ministry that I represent, the number of women in high-ranking jobs is rising steadily. I think that is important. It's important to have a diverse workforce, but also at the highest level. This also goes to the point that Natalia made about visibility. I think it's very important that from within the system we make sure that we introduce gender language everywhere where it matters, in treaties, in frameworks, in policy negotiations. For instance, talking about security, an example is joint gender statements at the Arms Trade Treaty Conference of State Parties. Maybe a place where you wouldn't expect it, but therefore all the more important that we do it. Through the way in which we spend our money. Put your money where your mouth is. So, to achieve full equal and meaningful participation and leadership of women in the security sector and peacekeeping operations. We, for instance, support programs like Women in Cyber Fellowship, but also the ELSI Initiative Fund, which aims to increase women's participation in peacekeeping operations. I think a third point that is very important is mainstreaming. We don't want to have feminist foreign policy as something separate. It should be mainstreamed in everything we do. And accountability was mentioned by Maria, by Natalia. For instance, the Netherlands tries to play a leading role when it comes to accountability for Ukraine. And when we held at this very same place last year an accountability conference on Ukraine, we made sure to integrate conflict-related sexual violence that Natalia also alluded to. And CRSV is also part of our support to the Office of the Ukrainian Public Prosecutor. And I think through interventions like that, we can really make a difference. And then to underline the point that I already made, and I think that is at the core of our policy, is the very close collaboration with civil society. Yeah. So for instance, we have an oversight board where we have representatives from different responsible ministries, like Peter's Ministry, Defense, Foreign Affairs, Justice, and Security, and Education, but also a wide variety of civil society organizations are represented on that board. Yeah. And as I said, we don't only have to talk with these civil society organizations in the Netherlands and internationally, but very much also at the local level. Yeah.
Okay, some ideas then. I'd love to get your reactions, Maria and Medina, on if those are adequate examples of how we can change the system. But before I do, is there anything you would add? Like in the Colombian experience, are you doing things differently going forward, having learned from the peace-building process?
Definitely, definitely. The Colombian state took very important decisions after the peace agreement negotiations regarding specifically the importance of women. First of all, to acknowledge that women should be put in the center. And putting women in the center and the agenda of women, peace and security in the center means, for instance, to create an institutional mechanisms that will guarantee that women would be put in the center every time. So exactly. So that's the reason why we just recently created the Ministry of Equity and Equality. So this is the institution that is going to take the lead on the process. But of course, it is also crucial to allocate enough and sufficient resources to implement the different policies adopted internally and internationally. At the same time, it is absolutely necessary to create effective systems of monitoring and evaluation of the impact of these policies. And it is crucial also to determine the implementation with output indicators, with outcome indicators that will show us exactly if we are going in the right way. I think these are the main points that we are adopting to realize this agenda, to make it a reality.
Thank you, Carolina. Let's start with you, Medina. Ideas there, the way money is spent, changing the language, mainstreaming, oversight boards, the creation of entire new ministries. Is that enough to change systems?
This is very interesting to hear that we are mostly focusing on how to change the system and institutionalization of the women, peace and security agenda and all the important matters around that. But I tell you one thing more interesting than that, that how do you function in countries in the war zone that system doesn't exist at all, like Afghanistan. System doesn't exist at all. From where you'll start. We are starting everything from scratch. After 20 years of investments of billions of dollars in terms of monetary and effort and energy and a lot of the compromises made, a lot of the victims and a lot of, a lot of efforts. So how do you work with that when the system doesn't exist and the lack of governance with a lot of risks, with the lack of political will? It makes it more challenging. It just doesn't exist. So the only way is to collaborate and bring different stakeholders on table, like international community, the government, people, both men and women, from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, Doesn't matter what they think in terms of political, in terms of their stand of viewpoints, in terms of their generation. We should bring them, and also the civil society. We cannot do it alone. Government cannot do it alone. We should create a ground for it with the help of people at the grassroots level. It's the people. And in people, it's not just women. I request from you, when you talk about the woman, peace and security, don't put woman first. It's and alone. That's not just a woman issue. This is progress issue in a country, this is stability issue, and this is a peace issue. And the countries that they have really realized on the importance of this agenda, and they brought women in this platform, and also men. This is so important to ask from the men in the decision-making positions, that how do you feel when you hear about the woman peace and security agenda? What it means to you as a man? What it means to you as a man in the decision-making position? What policies you want to change as a man to make it a better space for women? These are very critical questions that we also need to ask from the man. In my country, that system doesn't exist. We are working with all these stakeholders, hoping that we will impact the change and we will drive the change, starting everything from zero. We had ministers, we had ambassadors, we had laws, we had courts, we have everything. Now we have nothing. We have nothing. Political participation is a long journey. Even in the frontline defenders, as the frontline defenders in delivering the humanitarian aid, we are not allowed. Female are not allowed to deliver the humanitarian basic needs to the female beneficiaries. We are fighting for that. Girls' education, we are fighting for that. Women's right to work, a lot of other basic things that for you even it's not a matter of discussion. For us, it's like life-saving matters, to save the lives of girls, for child and forced marriage, to save the lives of women surviving from domestic violence and child abuse and all the other things. You know, for us, it's every little things that even it's not a matter of discussion for you. For us, it's our everyday battle, everyday struggle.
So we have to start from the ground up in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. It's definitely kind of a difficult pill to swallow. But let's go to Maria. Maria, your ideas on what we need to change the system in a Syrian context.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, first of all, as I may be repeating a little bit myself, but I think we need from international community to be consistent in their position around accountability and justice. The steps that have been taken in Syria are very important, and we are grateful. However, if states are not consistent, they are putting human rights at danger. They are putting their own engagement and their own value at danger, and they are putting their partners in danger. When women rights organizations are accused of having a foreign agenda or being supported by foreign ministries, and then the same foreign ministry are supporting human rights abuse in other countries, then they will be, the woman will be killed. I believe it would have been very much easier for me to be here and speak only about Syria. But what I know, what I have learned is all the conflicts are very much connected. I have said it. If Russia has been held accountable for its crime in Syria, maybe Ukraine will never happen. The rise of ISIS in Syria is very much linked to the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, but also in the invasion of the United States in Iraq and the chaos they have left. I think one of the main issues is we leave conflict into limbo sometimes because we don't have the time to deal with Lebanon now. We don't have the time to deal with this. And we go to another crisis, and we never go into the root causes, and we spend more money in defense, more money in military actions, as it is quick, effective, but it is not.
Okay.
think
Maria,
one last
to round
point,
up.
yeah, actually, and one last point, I think also we need to discuss, like, I'm here, I will be speaking as a Syrian, French, German, Kurdish family here in Europe, that I have multiple identity. I'm also concerned about the future here. The rise of far rights here in Europe is very dangerous. It's very dangerous for women's rights, for minority rights, for minority rights, either sexual minority or ethnic minority. It's dangerous for the democracy here. And it is very sad that it's only us, or very few politicians are supporting us, talking about the real issue, talking about social rights, talking about economic rights, and not blaming women, migrants, and minorities on all the problems we have. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much, Maria. Yeah, our guest. Thank you. I think that's a pretty clear battle cry there from Maria for us not to repeat the mistakes of the past and to really work on the future. And this is the moment, this is one of many moments, I should say. Roll your sleeves up, you're heading now for a break, and then after that, the breakout sessions. Do it with intention, do it with purpose. Work hard with one another to find solutions that people here desperately need. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. We've kicked off really well. I think this is the right spirit. Have a good break, and we'll see you later on today. Bye-bye.